An AI agent was given a simple task. Find me the cheapest dozen eggs on the internet. What it did was actually something different. It didn't just return search results. It bought actual eggs for $31.43. Sounds crazy. The user, it didn't get results. It found out via notification of a payment transaction. What does this story actually show? It shows the key promise of an agentic commerce system. It shows at the same time as well risks, and it shows an infrastructure that was not ready and that a lot of players in the industry are currently rushing to fix. Welcome to the Agentic Commerce Economy. I'm Rupert and this is my co-host Amir, and today we want to dive deeper into our first episode on agentic commerce. My name is Rupert. I'm a strategic project lead at Erste Group. And today, actually, I'm in a different role here. I'm a co-chair of the AI expert group at Mobey Forum. And together with Amir, we're usually breaking down the biggest and most important technologies that evolve in the current field of AI.
My name is Amir Tabakovic. I'm the founder of Experience AI. I bring around 20 years of experience at the intersection between payments and artificial intelligence. And I'm very happy and excited to be here today.
It sounds like you're the perfect fit for a discussion on agentic commerce.
It was first payments. I spent 10 years working for a major Swiss retail bank and then moved to artificial intelligence space in 2015, where my previous colleagues asked, machine learning, what's that? So nowadays, it's you don't have to answer this question anymore.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, what is agentic commerce?
Agentic commerce is an extension of something that we've been doing for a few years now. With introduction of AI assistants, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, we start moving some of the activities, let's say, with the internet search engines into AI assistants. So we start searching for different types of information, and one of the most interesting parts is commerce. So we start searching for products, and we also let these AI assistants to compare the different products and options we have. And now the next logical step in this process is also to allow these AI assistants to do purchases on our behalf. And that's actually what agentic commerce is.
It sounds, very convenient. So a tool is not only searching or comparing on behalf, it even can execute on my behalf. I'm giving away almost all control in this process, or at least for me as a user. It sounds like that I have to put a lot of trust into that system.
We had this meeting back in September. We talked about Model Context Protocol, or MCP, is already needed when you have agents which interact with your systems and are trying to get some data or introduce some actions. In September, the Agentic Payment Protocol was introduced by Google. So I basically took this kind of on the volley and introduced this because it was a much more interesting topic for our group and for the wider audience of our AI expert group. And why is it interesting? Agentic payments is really at intersection between payment infrastructure, artificial intelligence itself, and how AI agents behave, security, liability. So for our audience, which are banks, e-commerce provider, payment service providers, and so on, a highly relevant topic.
AI is here to stay. There is no doubt about it. And we are discussing a protocol. We are discussing something that's just for a couple of weeks, maybe months on the market, and is key to the success of the entire concept. But at the same time, new technology, new protocols, new components are again emerging. What does it show actually? And what are we trying to achieve with our podcast? It's not about kind of finding another validation that AI is here to stay. It's rather about, how will AI become the leading technology in a trustful way, in a reliable way, in a guardrailed way, so that we actually, as a user, can trust it fully. And with that, I think we should actually get fully started and dive deep into our egg story.
Yes, let's do it.
Very good, very good. It's not only our first episode today. We're going to have a couple of guests, right?
We'll talk about many different topics. We'll talk about protocols, technical architecture, which is required to run the entire workflow. We'll talk about topics like security, liability, stakeholder strategy, and new monetization models.
We are not talking here about AI and if it's going to evolve as a means in payments, as a means in e-commerce, but rather we talk who is actually responsible for different components within an agentic payment flow.
We have to take into account that AI is not perfect. We rely on the reasoning capability of AI, but there is a mismatch and we have to take this into account.
What we've seen in the past is AI has usually been the front runner. Let's talk about GPT 3.5, right? And everyone was kind of scrambling to make use of 3.5. As soon as someone had caught up with that model, we're already at 4.1, we're at 5. And that counts not only for OpenAI, it counts basically for any of the big tech players who are releasing model after model. So I'm very confident, in the capability and the technology, and I'm really curious now to dive deep into how it can actually benefit our eggs, or our, let's say, buying of eggs.
At the end, commerce is not the most complicated process to do. It's based on some set of requirements that the customer wants to have, and basically we do filtering. So I'm convinced AI has solved this problem.
Good. So do we want to dive deeper into the egg story?
Yes.
What actually happened?
It's such a good fit for our series of podcasts that if it wouldn't have happened, we would have to turn it into some type of an urban legend about the initiation of agentic commerce.
Actually, it would have happened anyways. If not for the eggs in February 2025, it would have happened for a different product, potentially something much bigger. It's just a moment of who is first and when, right?
Exactly. And the first person was, by accident, was a journalist from Washington Post who in February 2025 asked the agent to find some eggs. What happened is agent was capable to navigate the virtual browser, so it entered into Instacart with the stored credentials. It found some eggs. It also put the tip of $3. I think it paid urgent delivery and finally completed the purchase with the stored credentials of the credit card. So the journalist found out that this happened afterwards when he got the notification from his credit card issuer.
This wasn't actually a bug, right? It wasn't a hack. Like the agent had legitimate access to different components that were necessary within this checkout process, right? And the agent, like we often see now in agentic concepts, he just decided to buy something. In this case, eggs, luckily.
Yes, we would call this in the payment industry, this is the errant tool problem. So actually, it was an edge case. It was a new functionality that was possible, but not covered when it comes to all these compliance issues and security and so on. So the liability is obviously an issue there. Who is responsible for what happened?
So when we talk about liability and who is responsible, I'm usually thinking about something went malicious, right? There is fraud involved. But I think in our case, there was no fraud, right? There was no malicious action by a third party, let's say. An agent went rogue from the user's perspective. The user had an intent, but for him, kind of like the agent decided to do something it was not intended.
Obviously, the existing guardrails were protecting us from ability of this agent to create chemical weapons, but not to make a purchase. That's actually exactly what we are now looking into, is how to create guardrails which also protect the customer when it's doing shopping with an AI agent.
The idea is actually who is responsible, right? So a user gives an agent a certain intent, right? A certain action to do. And the agent thinks that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Now, the eggs, let's say, I don't want to buy that eggs actually, right? Or I'm not willing to spend $31. I didn't need a priority delivery. I didn't want to tip the merchant, right? Who is responsible? Who do you think should be responsible? Is it the user? Is it actually the e-commerce platform? Or is it the bank who is processing the payment, or the card provider who's processing actually the payment?
That's exactly the issue that we have to solve, and we are about to solve it with different set of rules and protocols which are being introduced into the market. And that's also one of the main topics of our podcast. So you're mentioning the intent. Absolutely, we have to set the set of rules, how to define what is the user's exact intent. We have to be able to also check when the agent has fulfilled this intent by creating a cart or putting the products into the cart. And then when it comes to payment itself. Exactly. And this is already kind of heading into one of the first topics that we will talk about, and this is the agentic payment protocol.
Good. Before we dive deep into, let's say, terms and concepts, I want to step back and just recognize that a purchase of $31, regardless if this is actually worth the $31 or not, in our belief, it's something that wouldn't make the headlines, right? But what it fundamentally shows is these $31 with the right spending limit could have been eventually $330. It could have been $3,030. It could have been maybe $30,000, right? So while it sounds a very funny topic that we are discussing about eggs here, it shows there is a structural need in the industry for technology that can, on behalf of a user act, actually has limits. So when we are thinking back now, how did we come to the state, right, of actually having an agent pay? Because those credentials are available for longer, right? Otherwise, it would not even have access to those. So can you take us actually back a bit? How did digital payment, and especially in e-commerce, evolve over the past, let's say, decades?
I mean, e-commerce evolved based on the foundation of internet, and internet was built only for the exchange of information, not for doing any type of transactions. So you had to put this next layer, e-commerce layer, on top of it, which was successfully done, and we see also the first solutions we have, and the most successful one in the last, let's say, 2 decades is card not present, which allows us to make a purchase by being identified by the system that we are the one that intends to make this purchase.
Now, our audience, everyone who is listening, especially the Mobey community, is like, perfect, my turf.
Yes.
It's basically card not present. I grew up with that. I know everything about it. Bring it on.
It's a really good concept as long as you have a human behind, because then we are also solving the problem of liability. We still need to have a lot of security behind, password, passkeys, 3D secure. We still have lots of fraud when it comes to that. But I mean, the system is capable to cope with these challenges.
But I believe we're not only moving from card not present now to what we call agentic commerce, but basically you mentioned multiple systems that were in place around that CNP concept, let's say, that actually made sure nothing goes wrong. So if there was not a human in place, would that system have worked as well?
Well, we could extend card not present, which is really based on the human interaction. And in the last 10 years, the system was extended with machine-to-machine payments. Machine-to-machine payments is a bit kind of an outlier where two machines are basically doing the transaction, but it's very rigid, very rules-based for some specific use cases like smart card and paying the toll, or a printer ordering the new cartridge. So if we consider card not present as something which is very broad and can help you to do lots of different type of commerce use cases, when we go to machine, we narrow down the use cases a lot. Now, what happens with the AI agents is all of a sudden the machines are able to reason and help us in making decisions when it comes to the huge spectrum of possibilities what we can purchase. Now we broaden the scope again. Now the question is what type of protocols we need to cope with this, and that leads to the next topic, and this is agentic payments.
Machine to machine works very well if I think about a pricing that we've agreed, right? If we've agreed that every month, kind of, let's say, I consume a certain service, can be any software as a service actually, and we have an agreed price, then I'm fine with this automatically being executed, or even if necessary ad hoc by a machine, right? The machine has a certain rule, if we stay on the wording, and I can fully trust that within that, if then scenario, it will execute accordingly. What my expectation would be, let's take a software as a service for one of the multiple channels where I can watch TV now on demand. If the price would vary by every day, right, and suddenly it comes to the end of the month and I need to execute that again, and suddenly the price went up, right, for any given reason, and there is no system in place that actually could avoid that, I would feel very uncomfortable actually giving the machine the right to just decide on my behalf, right? Like, is this still in the room where I consider it actually acceptable? Or should the machine in that sense, right, come back to me and actually validate, like, is this something is this premium now, that the additional premium that you're paying going forward, is this something that you feel comfortable, that you agree to? Or is it not, right? There is agreed pricing and you cannot just change it from month to month. Now, when it comes to the supermarket, for example, like on a weekly basis, almost prices change. And it doesn't mean they always go up, right? They can as well go down. There are discounts. There's an adaptation that actually prices go down. So let's go a bit into AP2 and understand how does this problematic of dynamic pricing in the end, right, factor that in.
Before going into it, maybe we should also define what AP2 is for our listeners. It's a protocol. It was introduced by Google in September 2025. The idea is how to provide a set of rules for this type of agentic payments, as you mentioned. When we talk about AP2, there are three important mandates that we have to talk about. The first is the intent mandate. The customer itself, the human, has to define exactly what type of products he or she wants to purchase, what is the amount limit or maximum amount that he's willing to spend, maybe some additional criteria, and once the customer has defined this, it's cryptographically set, and then we move to the next mandate, which is cart. We skip the entire search part. The agent is probably checking different merchants, comparing the offers, and then it assembles this cart. At that point, we can decide, how autonomous should the execution be of this mandate. If the user is super confident that agent will do everything perfectly, it can basically say, look, just execute. I don't want to check. Or you can go and the agent will contact you and say, look, I assembled this cart. Please, human in the loop scenario, I need the final confirmation. So these are kind of two options that you have for this cart mandate. And then you have the third type of mandate, that's a payment mandate. So that's the moment where the processor of this transaction goes back and checks all the previous mandates, identifies the agent, and decides the payment can be executed.
There's kind of like this, what it ensured was that a human does a transaction online in a certain setting, and we make sure that the human is actually who the human is, right? It is verified. Machine to machine didn't require necessarily the human to be there. It narrowed down the scope, but it was still confirmed that the human is there. So if an agent now on behalf is there, this concept still is valid. The risk is that the agent interprets differently. It has a different idea of what the intent is. And now with AP2 and with these checks that you just described, we basically try to make sure after that purchase and is done and the payment is authorized, that there is no one basically coming back and saying like, hey, I didn't mean to do that actually.
Yes, the trail is well documented. It has to be because of the liabilities. So what happens if something went wrong? So you have to be able to assess the entire workflow from the beginning, from the moment where you as a user define the intention and delegate or intent and delegate it to the AI agent until the purchase is made.
If I think about it, if I today log into LLM model of my choice, it gives me ideas, it makes suggestions how I can start a conversation, but in the end I come with a certain intent in, right? And having having a bar where I can type anything makes the world unlimited, so to speak, right? I can ask anything, right? But such systems, right, compared to a user interface in an application, for example, gives a lot of openness, right? If I have 3 buttons to click, me as a user, I'm very limited, but at the same time, that's very good, right?
You basically had an interface that was the same like a website, but the flow was was mimicking the dialogue, but there was no intelligence there. So
it ensures that the user cannot go off track, but at the same time, it actually limits the user, or it actually sometimes frustrates the user because the user has a different intention than exactly what I'm given. So it's a huge opportunity, and basically there is not one standard that can cover the entire journey of a user. So what I would love to do is actually go step by step through such a user flow from the intent comes up on my side as a user until actually the payment is transferred. I would love to take our listeners and our viewers a bit on the journey of which protocol or which kind of technology is currently arising. Like what are the things that are kind of popping up on the landscape of technology that actually ensure that me, again, as kind of like being a naive user, a very dumb user. I don't want to call our listeners or myself dumb, but in the sense of like, I don't know anything about it, but I want to make sure my intent is properly processed, and not the merchant, not the bank, not me myself have to come back afterwards and have a certain discussion about it. And the first step for me is kind of like, I want to buy something. I want to buy eggs. And in the past, I would go to a shop, I would go to internet, I search, I find a store, I do this transaction. Now I have at hand an agent. We can call it almost my procurement officer, right? If in my daily life, I need a certain product, I need a software, I talk to procurement. And procurement makes sure that we are doing all the right steps to actually have this compliantly, reliably executed in total the process. So I have an intent. I go to an LLM and I start formulating that intent. Talk me through what needs to be in place actually, and what is emerging on the market that ensures that my intent is given in a way that is understood and can be processed further.
Let's use some analogies to simplify this. So when it comes to intent, you need to give this private procurement officer some type of authority to do something for you. In normal case, you would go to notary and set up some type of legal framework to do that. And this type of power of attorney is I think the good analogy for that. So you set up exactly what you want, what the agent is capable of doing in your name. And there are concepts already appearing. So there is a verifiable intent, which was co-developed by MasterCard and Google, that helps us to install exactly this type of set of rules and document everything in a cryptographic way.
How often can I actually that clearly identify even my intent, right? When it's a clear transaction, like I need milk, the intent is very clear. So I guess I can give the LLM a certain range of options, right? What we learned in the egg story is actually there was no specific merchant as a counterparty defined, right? So the agent was given a task about buying eggs, but the user was kind of very open. Now, technically that's okay, because how I understand the concept of a verifiable intent is not that it's requiring a user to tell where should it buy, but it's rather like, please clearly just define the intent. We make sure that this intent is properly stored. It can be taken from somewhere and can be verified later. So if we speak in analogies, I have the intent to buy eggs now. What's next? Like how can this agent actually go out and somehow, find the right place to buy it? And what are the means to actually make this a more trustful experience, let's say?
Yeah. The first thing is, let's look at the bright side. These AI agents are much more powerful in searching for the products than we humans would ever be. We are lazy. We have inertia. We just don't want to waste time and read the fine print. We don't want to compare thousands of different offerings. This is something that AI agents are very good at. So what happens is that in our story with the X and the journalist, the agent was using this virtual browser, and therefore it was consuming the giving informations which are actually set for humans. What we see now with new type of protocols, and another one that I will, or abbreviation that I will drop now, is UCP, or Universal Commercial Protocol, helps the transition of all this merchant content in a direction that makes it usable for AI agents, not humans. So we are talking about the APIs which enable AI agents to consume this information in an efficient, machine-readable way. And this is a huge opportunity. So if we want to use an analogy there again, so just imagine you want to visit a restaurant. And before doing so, you have two options. The one is you can just stand in front of the restaurant and look at these nice images of the menus and make your decision, should I enter or not. On the other hand, you would send an entire team of experts. So nutrition expert, hygiene expert, that would do some type of a due diligence of the restaurant based on your criteria and then make the final decision. And that's exactly where we're going right now with Agentic Commerce.
It's an interesting situation. I want to take it into the digital world. I'm sitting at home with my family, and we want to have dinner and we want to order something, right? Usually nowadays, how the trends have emerged is that actually you don't look for a specific restaurant, you rather go on a delivery platform, and then you have a set of options, right? You have a setup of restaurants. If we compare it like this, where is the industry heading? Is it about being on such a platform? Because you as a small restaurant would probably not have the technical capability to actually be ready to expose yourself to an agent, and you kind of outsource that again to someone else, right? And it comes down to who is best capable to actually already integrate into the agentic world. And that comes actually to a follow-up thought of mine, is kind of like now where to look for, right? The user has certain intent, but at the same time the user trusts the agent. It finds kind of the best solution for me, right? That's still the trust that we talked about earlier. So you talked about UCP, you talked about verifiable intent, and you talked earlier about AP2. Now, how comes AP2 again in place? Like, my procurement officer has now a range of options. What's next? Like, how does he choose? Yeah, if I didn't give that intent, who is kind of an advantage from a technology perspective to be more likely to be picked maybe by the agent?
I think it's a challenge which now we are discussing about the merchants. But this is also the challenge to all of other industries which are providing services. I mean, let's talk about banks. Huge topic. Right now we're in this kind of mindset where we just imagine some type of e-commerce store there. But let's talk about bank. You provide services and you will be faced with some type of AI agents that will act on behalf of the customer. So will banks be able to move fast enough to adapt to the fact that you need basically two different layers of communication? You will still have to provide content for humans that visit your website, are looking for your products. And on the other side, you will need to have interfaces and information provided in a way that can be easily consumed by machines.
It's very interesting. It brings up a bit the idea of loyalty as well, right? I have loyalty to a certain maybe supermarket chain, right? I have loyalty to a bank. And if I send now the agent out to find me, so to speak, the best cash loan, a new credit card with the best perks, how is actually loyalty factoring in, right? We probably can do 3 episodes just on loyalty and how actually to make yourself as a provider, as the merchant, as the bank, very pleasing or very interesting to the AI, but at the same time, how is the user again feeding that in, right? And how do you make something as intangible as loyalty actually quite, let's say, tangible, so to speak? It's emotions, right? Loyalty is a lot about emotions. So
let's be a bit the devil's advocate. We can say maybe loyalty, in the way we understand it right now, is a synonym for inertia of the customer. So this type of a laziness and not unwillingness to move. But joke aside, maybe so loyalty will be packaged within the intent. within the intent mandate of the customer. So if you really want that your loyalty programs are considered when the agent makes the decision, this will be part of your kind of initial prompt and set of rules that you provide to an agent. And the agent will have much more patience to go through all the options you have in your loyalty program and assemble the cart in the way that benefits you the most. Now the question is, at that time, where is the real loyalty? Where are the emotions? Because it will be very, very opportunistic.
Yeah, I mean, loyalty, as you say, right? It's sometimes about price. It's sometimes about brand. It's sometimes about feelings. Yeah, probably price and brand feed into feelings. We're going away a bit from the from concepts and more into something, as I said, emotional. If we want to dial back a bit, we found the restaurant of choice. How do we now make sure that basically this intent was verified before that payment is initiated, is actually again kind of confirmed that what the agent chose in my cart, let's say, is matching my intent from before?
I will reuse your analogy about the procurement officer that has a power of attorney, is armed with all these mandates. Intent mandate that enabled him to make the search discovery, then the cart mandate that basically is the evidence that the intent was really kind of followed, and then finally the payment mandate that helps the other side, the merchant, the processor, to fulfill this or this transaction. Or to execute this transaction.
So what happens next? And there is an execution now. Can we ensure that there is no malicious, fraudulent party in this last step, right? That somehow interferes with the first two checks or with the first steps of the journey?
We are opening now the door to a topic that we will also discuss more deeply with one of our future guests when it comes to security. Absolutely. There will always be an opportunity for malicious actor in this area. One thing is that we will have to take care of is how to prevent prompt injections on this, let's say, merchant websites. How can we identify the agent? So we are moving from know your customers to know your agent. Again, something that is getting implemented right now as we speak. And we also have to discuss, although this intent and cart mandates are cryptographically kind of defined, maybe there will still be room for some type of fraudulent behavior if the hacker understands how to move within these constraints which are set by the customer.
You talked about prompt shields. Prompt shields actually have the idea to prevent unintended misuse of a user by formulating a sentence in a way that the LLM misinterprets it. So coming back to the egg story, right? There was no intent actually to misuse that, neither by the agent nor by the user. What you're saying is basically that the system in place going forward, it will not differ between malicious again and just an unintentional going rogue of an agent, but it will ensure that the user, who is kind of the least informed party in the whole equation, can rest assured, let's say, that from the intent to the card assembly all the way to the execution, there is no fraudulent activity in place, and he can trust this process.
Absolutely. So the initial example that we gave with this story with the purchase of the X, this wouldn't happen based on this new framework that we are talking about, because it would fail probably in the first step. The agent wouldn't be able to get the intent mandate based on what the customer, the journalist, was defined in his prompt. So that would be kind of already game over for this process. And even if there would be kind of room for interpretation there, most probably in the next step, the user would have to confirm the cart and would understand that something went wrong. So there are different steps where this transaction would fail. Even if we would pass this step, this would be not an authorized AI agent, most probably, because it wasn't one. So even the payment mandate is not there. So no chance.
Good. Do you have any message for our listeners that you want to give them on their way?
We are right now talking a lot about the details of agentic commerce. I want to stress that not all commerce will move to AI agents. Humans perceive pleasure when they buy things, and I think they don't want to give away that and delegate everything to agents. So we will still have to both channels. We'll probably have to understand quite early which type of products are basically commodity that you don't want to think about. And I'm sure in future this will be handled by the agents. And then we will have these luxury products, things that give us joy. And we will still lie on the sofa and spend our evenings clicking through and kind of enjoying this process of buying things.
I agree. Humans are so fundamentally different, and what's commodity for one is not commodity for someone else. So I'm really curious actually to see how early adopters will jump on the train much faster than other parts, let's say, of a user group, and whether we can actually break them down into segments like we always try, especially in banks.
Hey. My understanding of commodity is completely different than the understanding of my wife or my daughter. So I would say 95% of things for me are considered commodity.
I don't want to open now a new topic about how agentic commerce will actually disrupt families and their purchasing behavior.
No, we'll have more time to spend together, believe me.
Do we want to give a bit of an insight of what's happening next? Yeah, we have a couple of guests that we will talk to about this concept.
Yes. So I already mentioned the topic of security. Very important. You know how one incident can throw back the entire industry and the entire development of one topic if something happens. The new technologies are always kind of measured by higher standards than the one which are already in place. I mean, card not present, fraud exists. So we'll talk about that with one of our guests in the podcast, with Andres Schmidt from Accenture. That would be one.
Who else are we talking to, let's say? And I think it's a company that if we count words in this episode today, has been named the most. It's actually Google, right?
Exactly.
Google being fundamentally rooted in the internet, in the search economy, in the e-commerce space, saw the chance actually, and they are in the different layers and the different steps of the journey of a user. They always, their name comes up. So of course, right, we love to have Google on board and to go a bit deeper into their view of AP2, of UCP, how they see the role of banks, of PSPs. This is going to be a very exciting discussion where we kind of look into one of the big tech players' perspective of where this is heading. And then I think we have two more episodes lined up. One is with Nexi and one is with MasterCard.
Exactly. So we'll cover also other stakeholders in this equation, which is actually very interesting. And I'm convinced that this will make the whole series exceptional in a way that we are able to bring all these stakeholders together and talk about the same topic.
I'm very excited for what's to come over the next weeks. And yeah, thank you, dear listeners, for joining us today. This was, as we said, just the start of a very exciting series presented by Mobey and presented by us as co-chairs of the AI Expert Group. We're really looking forward for you to actually dial in and tune in to our next episode about the Agentic Commerce Economy. Thank you, Amir.
Thanks.